Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Dan Greco, who is an executive performance coach. He works with many people within the mining sector, plus other sectors, around performance, personal issues, and challenges they face every day within our industry and other related industries. He previously worked in catering as a chef, working across many mine sites remotely and fly out. So his experience and understands what those conditions are like working on, obviously, in our industry. Dan actually responded to one of my LinkedIn posts about getting a guest on to overcome some obviously mental health issues with fly out lifestyles, and sort of some of these common themes he often speaks about in his work. So it'd be good to share some sort of knowledge, obviously what Dan has gone through, and maybe give us some tips to help improve anyone that is working on a fly out basis or working remotely, that we can probably take on board and help us on our sort of day-to-day challenges, or sorry, the audience day-to-day challenges working in those kind of environments. So let's get straight into this, and let's welcome Dan to the podcast. How you doing, Dan?
I'm going well, thank you, Rob. Thank you for that introduction. Very much appreciate it, and appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, and again, thank you for reaching out. Obviously, you saw my post. I wrote some posts around mental health, and the reason is I have spoke to a few people recently, plus I saw some content out there around fly out lifestyle. So I thought I would try and get someone to come on just to speak about, maybe give some hints, maybe give some tips, maybe show some signs of where things could be breaking down, but you may not realize it. So it'd be good to sort of understand where you've come from and some of the conversations you've had with people, and what people individually can look at in order to maybe help through some of the mental health issues that they could be having. So before we get into all of that, I wonder if you can give our audience, tell us a little bit about your background, your career. Obviously, I mentioned that you're in catering within obviously our industry and other industries, and where you've moved on to from then.
Yes, certainly. So it was probably around 2008. I actually started off in oil and gas exploration, working for a couple of different companies, but mainly Compass Group. I stayed with most of the time. So I ended up being a head chef on an exploration rig. And anyone who's ever worked on rigs, we tend to work like a 4 weeks on, 4 week off roster. And I have to admit, it's quite confronting. I did that for a number of years and sort of became sort of a bit of a roving head chef, and would be sent to like mine sites to help like lift different sites that sort of needed their scope. We needed to increase customer satisfaction and that sort of thing. But certainly working in those environments, it's no different to whether you're in the open cut mine or not. You're doing the time, you're doing whether it's a 2-on-1 roster or a 3-on and 1 off roster. And just still dealing with the same, almost monotonous, surrounded with the similar people in that same sort of like limitations, etc. And look, I did that for a number of years, probably about 8 years solid. And so I'd experienced in my own journey what it was like to really bear the brunt of how harsh it can be, not just on your body when you're out there working those long hours for extended periods of time, but how it actually really impacts your lifestyle and your life back home. Nowadays I work, I do work as executive coach, typically in leadership. I have definitely worked with people within the fly out industry who work in that sort of scene there. I also work as an account manager for a mining software company that provides, you know, support for workforces in out those industries. And that's just sort of been my progression over the course of time in my experience.
Okay. Obviously, I was going to say you're a chef, and I think chefs do work long hours anyway, without even being in like the mining industry. But obviously, what we want to talk about is the fly in, fly out lifestyle. So, what would you consider some of the main challenges in working on a fly in, fly out sort of roster? And obviously, you've experienced it yourself, and you've probably spoken to people that have challenges around working in the mining industry and also working that kind of role as opposed to a Monday to Friday role. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced and people have spoken to you about that you would obviously like to speak about?
Sure. Well, look, obviously there's the physical challenges on your body. You know, there's the different rosters. There's the getting up early, having to get onto planes, getting flicked onto night shifts, that sort of thing, working, you know, 12, 13-hour shifts for up to 2, maybe 4 weeks at a time. And that does have a physical impact on your body. Now, to be honest with you, I find that you can kind of get conditioned for that, and it's not such a bad thing, but it does produce a little bit of wear and tear. Realistically, it is those physical things in terms of you're not sleeping in your own room, you've got to sleep on a bed. That room might need to get cleaned, and you might get disturbances. So it's really about understanding that it's not just like living like a normal life, it's living in a community. It's living in a communal life where you don't necessarily get to control everything around you. So there's a level of patience that one either needs to develop or they end up losing their patience in terms of living in those close confines. And that does have sort of an on-flow impact, you know, towards your emotional self and your emotional life. However, having saying that, Rob, what I've always found, and I'd say many of your listeners who work in that environment might agree, is that the big things we tend to deal with quite easily, and it's the little things that we tend to have challenges with. So it could just be like, you know, something is going on back home, little Johnny got detention or something like that, and you want to be there, but you can't be there, and you have to actually focus on your job. So you literally have to shut yourself off from how you're feeling. And you have to kind of like shelve that. You almost have to schedule those emotions for another time. Even though there's a part of you that wants to be there, wants to be at home, you want to be a good dad or you want to be a good mum. And let's be honest, it's typically a male-dominated industry. But I'd love to include both because, you know, it's a very inclusive industry as well. But essentially, there's a part of you that is thinking about your life back home, but you're still here on the job having to face the daily grind, the stresses, the pressure, and actually get things done in a safe and effective manner. And so having to sort of split yourself like that, don't get me wrong, we all kind of have to do that from time to time, but rather than being able to consolidate that when you rock up home from work at 6 p.m, you literally have to schedule that for a couple of weeks before you can actually be present. And over a course of time, these things really do produce an impact on somebody because, well, what I found, Rob, and a lot of the people I have spoken to do concur, is when you're sort of working in that way and you're out of the picture, so to speak, for a period of time, your life back home, whether you've left a wife or a husband and the children, they've basically learnt to almost live without you in some way, shape or form. And I know that sounds harsh and I know it sounds brutal, but it's actually true. They've actually had to learn to cope without you because when things go sideways, you know, you've not been there. You're not physically present there. And you might have a will to be there. You might have an intent to be there. And that actually causes more tension for you because it really pulls on your heartstrings and can muck someone around quite emotionally. And that can have risks on the job. But if we just keep it about the mental health here, it's that knowing that you're not there and they've had to get on without you. And almost sometimes when you rock up back at your own home, it's like the world has kept moving and you're just, how can I put it? You're an extra in your own movie, so to speak. And that can have a pretty compounding effect of one's mental health.
Yeah, it's funny. I was speaking to someone yesterday, and the question I was going to ask is just following on from that. When you've worked a roster, no matter what length of time it is, and then you go back home how should you act? What things should you, obviously, and from speaking to someone yesterday, sometimes you've got to think about the other person, what they've gone through. And I suppose most people don't. They just go back, they might want a bit of a rest, and they probably can't. But what would you say, how should you act? And obviously you've spoken to people probably around this particular issue. How do you think they should act? What kind of things should they be thinking about, apart from their partner, their family, just so it eases any conflicts that you may get as soon as you walk in the door after being away for a few weeks?
Sure. Well, it's a pretty deep question you've asked, Rob, but I'll try and do my best to answer that. But in all honesty, I think you need to approach it when you're coming home. What you don't want it to be is, you don't want it to be like a shock factor. You don't want to just rock up there and be confronted with things that you didn't expect. And you don't want to rock up in a way where it might be impacting what's been going on at home. I think it's just about being mindful and understanding that there is a wheel in motion back at home. And just because you're back, that doesn't stop. Life has had to keep moving, and that's just been necessity. A lot of the advice that I've given, especially young men, like young fathers and things along those lines, has been like, preempt your journey back home. Make sure that, and there's a lot you can do to basically kind of preempt it, whether it's like ramping up communication, starting to think of special things that you could do with each other and starting to seed those in, so that actually it's more of a, you start to relate to your life back home before you actually get home. I think that those little things are quite important, but essentially it's really just being mindful that life has had to actually continue on. And you coming home, sometimes it's like being a pedestrian in the way, because, your husband or wife and your children, they've all had to manage and continue in the way that they've had to do. They've had to adapt. And just because you're back, that doesn't stop. And I think it's the realization that you need to understand that it's very important that it's not all about us. And I can tell you a story. I remember coming home after, it was a 30-hour journey. I'd come off a night shift out of Timor. I'd come back home, and my wife at the time, we had a 2-year-old child and a young baby. I think our youngest daughter was around about 6 months. I was exhausted. Imagine 30 hours travel, no sleep. And I just walked in, and I basically got handed a baby straight away. And I'm thinking to myself, I need to do a risk assessment on this. I'm literally not safe to handle this child right now, like time out for safety sort of thing, My wife did not understand at all. In her mind, she's like, you've been on a holiday for the last 4 weeks and I've dealt with this screaming child. It's your turn now. And so, yes, we were young and unfortunately a little bit naive. But it's those little misunderstandings. All I wanted to do was sleep. All she wanted was a break. And if we had actually communicated more effectively and put things in place, we could have actually moderated that and sort of had a nice sort of, dovetailed that together a bit better. But unfortunately, it's those sorts of things that can kind of create a bit of impact upon return.
Obviously, mental health is something that's been in the news for quite a few years more recently, and whether the mining industry has more mental health issues than other industries, I don't know, but I think it is pretty high within the mining industry. What would you say from your experience, and I suppose not necessarily working in the mining industry, you're a service provider to the mining industry, and then you would have gone around different sites. You also worked in oil and gas, probably other industries as well. What are some of the signs that you can see from afar? And obviously now you're an executive coach speaking to some people that may have certain mental health signs. What are some of the signs that you see that if someone was aware of them, can maybe then address them?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And so to answer that question, I'd sort of have to bring up and say, well, people have different dispositions. Everybody has a different psychological disposition. So people who are typically more introverted will tend to probably withdraw even more. They'll get sort of stuck into their habits, and that can actually be a place of safety and protection for them as well. So it doesn't necessarily ring alarm bells, but if someone who's generally chatty just starts to withdraw a little bit more, that's usually a sign that there's something kind of going on that's weighing heavy on their mind. Alternatively, there might be individuals that are typically more extroverted. And, I know here in Western Australia, or Australia in general, on the mine sites, there is quite a strong drinking culture. And so, it's not unusual that you'd have people go to the tavern, go to the bar like 5 nights, maybe every night of the week. And it's kind of this almost like a bravado kind of sense. And in many ways, it is a form of addiction. I'm not saying that these people are typically alcoholics, but it's an addiction to an aversion of that emotional kind of connection, so to speak, or at least they're finding it through their sense of mateship at the bar. Now, that can have a positive side and a negative side. We've all gone to the bar probably and had chats and gotten things off our chest. However, if you're doing it all the time and you know in yourself that you're relying upon it, then that can be a sign that you're really actually not facing what's actually going on. And, I don't want to speak for women out there, but I know that us men, we're really good at actually sweeping things under the carpet. We're really good at scheduling our emotions and kind of dealing with them later and putting them off and actually never getting to them. And then they can kind of like come out in some sort of way that is unexpected, whether it's through anger, an outburst, or actually lead into a full-blown addiction as such. But I usually look for people who are, withdrawn, or people who are actually kind of like really kind of, putting on that sort of bravado where they're almost not really being real with themselves. And one way I like to think about it, and this is, I suppose, an analogy that I thought of about myself when I used to hop on that plane, it was as if I was putting on like a 1-inch thick like suit just so that I could protect myself from everything else around me. Because if you can imagine this, Rob, you're working in an environment, maybe there's a few hundred, maybe a couple of thousand on some sites of lots of other people who are basically in the same situation. So that we're all doing the same thing. So it becomes socially acceptable. So we can all hide off our emotions. We can all say, yeah, we're living the dream. We're living the dream. As long as everyone keeps saying that and pretending that Father Christmas is real, we'll all believe it, But the truth of the matter is, when you go back home and you look at your real life and you have to face hopping on that plane again, there can be a bit of a drop or a sinking feeling in a lot of people because you're leaving loved ones, you're leaving friends. Little things like, just being out of sight, out of mind. A lot of people that I had spoken to, especially when you're working the longer rosters, it's just you're actually not at home for the majority. And so therefore the people who are at home, who might be your acquaintances or friends, they just start to think that you're not there. So you stop getting invited to certain things, and things like that actually impact your quality of life. Now, that doesn't mean to say it's for everybody. There are some people out there who are really good at maintaining those relationships. And there are other people that just get tunnel vision and get stuck into the work and don't think beyond that, And so the signs are going to be very different depending on the individual. But I would sort of say that, if you've got people around you that and you know what they're typically like, and you start to see that maybe they're withdrawing, or maybe they're hitting the beers a little bit harder than usual, or pretending that everything's okay all the time, everything's fine, I'm living the dream. It might be an opportunity just to sort of try and have a slightly deeper conversation. Hey, how are things going at home? How are the kids going? And sort of just tap into something that connects them to the reality of their real life, of who they actually are, not who they are on site.
What issues do you see most often in people that maybe further down the line, they then sort of develop more mental health problems, and then wherever that leads to, whether that leads to something that's more prevalent? What are some of the most common issues that you've experienced and people that you coach see that are small problems now, but further down the line they become big problems?
Yeah, look, I'd say typically relationships that suffer. Relationships are a huge thing, and most people choose to work away, to work FIFO, because of the lucrative money you can make. And if you think of your family unit almost like a business, it's like, well, all right, let's have an agreement. You're going to stay home with the kids, or one partner will, and one partner might go away and work and make really good income. and that's for our combined benefit. Well, if you're not doing the preventative maintenance, so to speak, and actually developing that relationship and it breaks down, that's actually going to cost you big time. It's going to fail. Where most people go wrong is basically a lot of people aren't very skilled when it comes to communication and actually relating to people. And it's understanding like, okay, not how do I relate, but how does he or she need me to relate to them to be significant in their life? And so technically speaking, like relationships are the number one thing that I've seen that really do make the biggest impact and are really easy to fix, and they're worthwhile to fix. I mean, off air, we shared, Rob, I told you a bit about my story. I wound up, developing the golden handcuffs. I had a few properties I was invested in. My relationship was on the rocks. I couldn't actually get away from working away because I had these golden handcuffs and I needed to sustain the investment because that's what I was there to develop. And eventually the whole house of cards came tumbling down. That is not an uncommon story by a long shot. It's really prevalent. Look, the other side of it is basically addiction as a broad sort of term. Typically, and look, choose your poison basically, but I'd say alcoholism is quite prevalent. But when I speak about addiction, I'm not just talking about substance abuse or alcohol per se. An addiction is almost anything that you're using to hide the sort of like the reality of what is going on for you. And so people do tend to put on these shields, and you can get addicted to having an aversion to your own feelings. And what that leads to is almost like a desensitization. And when you actually do that, you have potential to lose sense of what's really deeply going on within you. And then you can also lose that elsewhere. And so, yeah, drink, drugs, sex addictions, gambling, pick it. Everyone's got one. Or whether you're someone who buys all the fancy toys, you buy the jet ski, the caravan, the fancy Land Cruiser, all the good stuff that says to the world, hey, look, I'm successful. But really, you're actually just trying to give yourself a tangible reason why you're actually dealing with what you have to out on the mind side. And I just want to say as a caveat, not everybody suffers. There are some people who've made it work for them, but there is quite a large portion who do face challenges along the way. And those are just the typical sort of ways that they tend to manifest. I've just come to notice.
How do you think most people cope with sort of fly in, fly out lifestyles? What are some of the, like you said, this doesn't apply to everyone, but some people that cope with lifestyles better, what are they doing differently?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, actually, because I would say that the people who do it really well have a very strong, defined sense of purpose. They have a clear set of goals, and they actually can measure their progress towards those goals. Essentially speaking, Rob, like if you set a goal for yourself and you can actually see that you're moving towards that, it actually releases positive endorphins. You experience more high quality emotions. Okay, those high quality emotions provide you with a natural buffer towards negativity, or the ability to cope with resilience towards like a different scene. And so I would say the people who do it really well, whether it's like, look, I want to save 50 grand this year, or whatever it is to buy my first house. I'm going to do this because I've got this holiday booked, and me and the family, we're going to do this. We're going to achieve that goal. And then you can actually see like, look, we're moving forward in life, and then everyone's winning. It's a win-win situation. The family wins, you win, and obviously, the company wins as well because you're there and you're healthy and strong. I would say those are probably the main broad strokes that, if you really want to make it work for you, you really need to focus on that purpose, the goals, it gives it meaning, and know why you're doing it.
And do companies really recognize mental health? I know obviously you read articles and it's one thing saying something, but it's another thing doing something. Do companies, and again, I'm speaking very broadly, and obviously you've been in oil and gas as well as the mining industry, do they make a lot of effort around people that suffer mental health issues, or is it when it's too late, then they have to act?
Well, okay, so I would say that companies are aware, And I would just say though that, and I don't think it's the lack of trying, but I find that a lot of what the companies do is just touching the surface. Okay, and so like you could go into any campsite, or the ones I've been to here in Western Australia, and behind your door and in your room, or your donga as they call it over here, there'll be like maybe like a sticker with a number and a service that you can call. I can tell you right now, I don't know anybody who's ever used that service. And it's lovely that it's provided, but you know, I would love to know the statistics on how many people actually use it. And again, I think like you mentioned, maybe if you were really far gone, maybe you would. But in terms of preventative measures, I think what a lot of companies are trying to do is improve the lifestyle. And so over here in the West, I've been to sites that have basketball courts, volleyball courts, pool tables, lovely big taverns, and they make it feel like you're in a village as such. You know, I've been on some oil and gas installations where, you know, you'll have personal trainers and people to help you, you know, if you want to lose weight, to work out like a meal plan with you and things along those lines. And those things are lovely, and they definitely do support positive well-being. They definitely do. What I find they don't do is they don't get to the core. They don't actually get to the core of what's actually going on there. And I think a lot can be done in that space. And look, I'd be honest with you, I think in terms of, I think the companies want to do the right thing. It's just that it needs to connect and land with the employees, with the people on site. If you could give them all the best services in the world, unless they uptake it and know the value of what they got, it basically becomes a waste of money. You know, you might as well give me a new sports bag, you know, and that'd give me the thumbs up. Or give me a couple of beers at the bar and I'll be happy then. But all these things are short-lived, as you might imagine. I think, in all honesty, look, they do provide, again, the counselling services, and they want to do the right thing. I just don't think there are enough people out there who are specialised, who actually really know what it's like and understand what it's like to be out there, to actually work with these people, to put in the preventative things, to actually run like little workshops and go, hey, look, let's talk about why you're actually here. Let's get real. It's not just about to make the money. What does that get you? Let's make it real. Let's make it visceral. You know, have a pet project while you're here and like achieve your goals even faster. I think that those sorts of things have traditionally become much more powerful in terms of building a positive and successful mindset.
What do you think needs to change in the industry to reduce mental health? Now, obviously, I take it mental health wouldn't go away, but what can the industry do to help and support to reduce it as much as it can within our industry?
Okay, it's a good question. It's a big one too. I feel like I need to think about that one for you. Look, at the end of the day, I think a lot can be done in just understanding that, you know, people are people, you know, and really when you're working 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, and you know that you're spending the majority of your life on a site, you know, and it might have certain things like that, but you are spending the majority of your life out there. I feel like there needs to be some facility, like for example, like in the mental health sort of services, you know, they have mental health days because they recognize, like, you know, this is not a sick day. This is just some time that you need to do you, you know, it's just some time that you need to do you. And I know a lot of the time, like, you know, on mine sites, in oil and gas, you know, your back-to-back depends on you. You might be a highly skilled driller. You might be, you know, a highly skilled caterer. You could be a manager. You could be in, you know, in the, what's the name, HSEC, and managing sort of all the operational sort of safety type of things. And people are depending on you. And there's almost like no ability just to sort of take a bit of time out, take a breather as such, unless you actually, you know, most guys, most women I've come across tend to work contracts as well, maybe short-term contracts. This is especially, I found, with oil and gas. So you don't actually get annual leave. It's considered your time off is enough time off. However, you know, if you're hopping on a helicopter, it's something like a $40,000, you know, ride per helicopter. Unless you're dying, like, you're not going to get sort of shipped out unless there's something critical going on. And so I see why it's so difficult for the companies, and it's difficult for the people, for the workers. It's just like, how do you actually bridge that gap? And I think that that's something that requires a lot of people coming together and coming up with a plan to almost just change just to change the entire sort of way that we approach business. I feel like the world can sort of have another look at how we're actually approaching to do this and reinvent them. We're very good at innovating, but I think we need to keep innovating how our workforce works best.
What advice would you give someone that may be shy or doesn't open up, and they probably feel that something isn't right, but they might be too shy to speak to maybe their friends, or even just speak to anyone? Is there any sort of advice where you've experienced it? Obviously, work within your working, whether you're working on an oil and gas project or a mining project, or you've coaching someone. What sort of advice would you give them?
So, people who are particularly quite shy would, a lot of the time, we might call them people who are typically introverted as such, tend to find more of an ability to communicate, say, online. It might not necessarily be social media. It might be more of a chat forum where they don't have to sort of show their identity per se. I'd say whatever it is that works for you, just find that little outlet where you're actually connecting to people, and hopefully people who are actually supportive of you. And that's really, really important. I think everybody needs to have their support network in place. And it's vitally important when you're working in a remote environment as well. So I would say, almost being shy is not necessarily an excuse. Even if you've got one or two people that have got your back, find a way to communicate with them. And I mean, look, one of the little examples I have is I'd have my brother-in-law and another good mate, and we'd just be three of us on a messenger group on Messenger, and we'd all just have each other's back, send each other little podcasts that we think are good and this, that, and the other. But that you've got a bit of momentum, and whether you want to call it a little brotherhood or something along those lines, where it's just a couple of people you can check in with and they're going to check in with you. Having that little basic support network becomes vitally important. And I think it's especially important when you are working away. A lot of the time we don't have access to telecommunications like phones. Mind you, things are really quite good nowadays, but it's not always guaranteed. So even if you can find, a couple of people on your campsite or on the rig or vessel or wherever you are that you can kind of buddy up with, and it doesn't have to be formalized. Just someone that you say g'day to every day. How you doing? What's going on? All you need to do is remember, have they got kids? Check in with them. And I guarantee they'll start checking in with you. It's important to forge those relationships. And again, honestly, Rob, I was never usually a confident, outgoing guy. But I learned that, if I want to succeed in this world, it definitely helps, even if it's just with one or two other people. So I'd strongly encourage those who don't feel like doing that, at least jump into a chat forum where you can at least communicate with how you are.
And obviously you're not working that fly out lifestyle now. But if you know what you know now, what would you probably done differently when you did work there?
So I think for me personally, I suffered a bit of mental health. When I was working away, I had big challenges, and a lot of it was because I was leaving behind a young family, and it just killed me. It pulled at my heartstrings so bad, and I actually felt guilty, and I started questioning, am I trading my ability to connect with my kids for more money? Am I trading my kids for money? That was the thing that was going on in my head, and it really did play on me. And look, I learned the hard way. I ended up getting the divorce. I ended up losing the properties because of the divorce. So everything that I built up basically almost was for nothing. I did sort of suffer a bit of depression while I was out there. So what I have learned in that journey is, number one, if you've got a family at home, cherish them. Cherish them and make sure that they know that they're cherished. And you need to be able to demonstrate this. And like I was saying at the very beginning of the chat, a lot of it is how you are interacting on your way back home. Almost, you don't want to sort of just show up as a shock. Really say, hey, build up some energy around it. Say, hey, I'm really looking forward to being there. Don't go home feeling entitled. Understand that whoever's you've left behind, they've been working double time as well. I think that's vitally important. And little things like, in all honesty, just, you know, it can be very, very insignificant, just like walking up behind your partner, maybe as she's doing something around the house, and just telling her how much you appreciate them and how like you're all in this together, reminding them we're all in this together, we're all doing our bit, and making sure that that is, you know, you're aligned on your goal. And this is again why it's really important to have goals. I think when I started out, I wasn't very clear on goals. I just knew I wanted to make more money. And I thought buying houses was a good way to do that. I didn't know, you know, but my partner and I, we weren't aligned. And so, you know, it kind of grew apart, so to speak. In terms of my own mental health, the best thing that I started to do was build good and strong routines. Now, I mentioned that I really suffered. I actually ended up with depression, but I started to rebuild myself through having daily meditation, going to the gym every day. And I know a lot of the people who are probably listening to this go, yeah, mate, I work bloody 12 hours a day. I've got nothing left to go to the gym. I hear you. I was there. It's state of mind. It's just a state of mind. What I used to tell myself was all you need to do is just rock up. You don't even need to do anything. Just go to the gym. Just go there and just do one exercise. I don't care if you're there for 10 minutes. That 10 minutes easily turns into half an hour. It easily turns into 45 minutes. Next thing you know, you've had a good workout and you will feel good about it. The important thing is when you start to build these habits, you know, maybe meditation in the morning, a bit of journaling, thinking about things, you know, thinking about the future that you want to create for yourself, getting really crystal clear on your goals. Now, at the end of the day, most people out there, you don't need to actually go hire a coach. I know that sounds strange, I'm a coach, but you don't need to necessarily hire a coach. There's great podcasts out there. There's a lot of wonderful resources that you can get for free just to get the ball rolling. If you're the sort of person that really does want to like have someone like really push you and guide you in a strong way, then fine, you know, outsource, get someone who's got your back who can help you. But getting really clear on what your purpose is, what do you stand for, what are the missions you want to accomplish, what you value in life, and getting super clear on that and bringing it home to the family. These are the things that make you bulletproof, you know, in that environment. I essentially look, you know, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to end up teaching yoga on one of the ships that I worked on. And so we were able to run classes for large groups of people. And it was wonderful, you know. Anything that brings people together on a site, because a lot of the catering companies tend to sort of put things on, or they'll have quiz nights or different sorts of activities. Put your hand up, jump in on those, get involved in those sorts of things, connect to other people. These are the things that are really important, that will really bring the humanity out in you, because you don't want to feel like a drone just working day in, day out on that repetitive cycle. Involve yourself with other people, know where you're going in life, make sure that you spend a lot of time attending to your family in the best way possible. Those are the cornerstones, I would say, that really will make you bulletproof in that environment.
And I suppose a lot of these things don't happen overnight as well. And I suppose, like you said, it's forming a habit. So don't think that you do a few things and then it's done. It needs to be a continuous process. And you need to probably, I suppose, make changes along the way as well if things are not necessarily working the way that you want them to work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And working FIFO is actually perfect for habit building, to be honest, because, you know, everything is kind of like predictable and to a certain degree. And you might only have small pockets of time, but it becomes like a game. Like, how can I maximize my time to give me the maximum benefit and yield? You know, and again, you don't have to spend hours at the gym. You know, 20 minutes is enough. You know, spending some time reading, feeding your brain and getting good at these things. And it's almost like I said, it's like a game. You can nip and tweak and perfect it along the way. And I guarantee you, if you actually start viewing your time away, very similar to being on a retreat. And that was personally the trick for me. It was like, how can I change my mindset to see, rather than this as work and like, oh my God, I've got to drag myself through the day, to actually seeing this as I'm on a retreat. And if you've ever been on a retreat for a week or whatever, they tend to sort of have like a rhythm and a program set for you, and you rock up and you do everything, but it's for your benefit. Well, you get to custom design this, and the bit where you're working is the bit where it puts money in your bank, and that's just part of the puzzle, but it's not the entire puzzle.
Yeah.
The trick is, you know, having that time when you go home and just letting yourself relax and not necessarily maintaining that sort of routine, and then you have a nice balance between both lives.
We get obviously a lot of older, experienced people listening to this podcast, but we also get the younger generation listening to this. So obviously, some of these mental health issues maybe not, may be happening to people that are more experienced in the industry because they've obviously had a pattern and they run through that pattern to later in life when these issues are really on top of them. What advice would you give to the younger generation, people that are entering our industry or have been in our industry for a few years, to try and minimize any mental health issues? And again, everyone's different, so it's not going to apply to everyone. But is there anything that you can advise our younger audience, so it doesn't get to those stages when later in their lives?
Absolutely. I'd say be proactive, not reactive. A lot of the younger people are very familiar with how to access a lot of the good free information that's out there. Use it, put it to work, practice it. Find people in your life that are really good role models. You really don't need more than 3. And if you can have somebody that is a role model where you work with, and you see them as a leader, I'd be so bold. And again, this is not everybody, but I'd advise you to actually dare yourself to go up and say, hey, Rob, you've been working out here for so long. I don't know what your secret to success is, but I can see that you really know what you're doing. I want to have a successful career out here, in the mining industry. And I just see you as a leader and a bit of a role model. If you see that there's anything that I can do or any advice that you can give me along the way, I'd really appreciate that. If you can say that to somebody, number one, it makes them feel like they have a sense of purpose and meaning, which actually enhances their ability and their presence. And you're really sort of recognizing them as a leader. Most people are willing to mentor because there is a beautiful sense of being able to give back to others. So I'd say be humble, be proactive. Don't think you know everything, because it takes a wise head to survive in that environment without developing a bloody drinking problem or a divorce or some other nasty kind of habit. And you'll find the people that do it well, they do it smart, they're professionals in their industry. Tap into them. It doesn't matter if they're in another department or not, but find your people. And again, just be humble and proactive. I would highly recommend it, and you'll thank yourself for it.
Yeah. And lastly, and concluding, what advice can you give, or some, I suppose, a few points as to how anyone can cope better with within a fly in, fly out lifestyle?
Well, get lots of sleep for a start. Eat well. And again, I used to work as the head chef on many different sites, and we do want to impress our customers. We want them to say, wow, the food is tasty and delicious. And I would say if you've got more of a health conscious, or you want to be more health conscious, and you find that you're not getting that on site, then request it. Ask them, just say, be nice to the chef, because, it's like your mum. You don't want to, they're feeding you, they're taking care of you, but just say, hey, listen, is it possible that we could do some steamed chicken every now and then? I'm just trying to eat a little bit more healthy. But regardless, there's always a salad bar. Take care of your body. Treat yourself like a temple. See like your lifestyle as a retreat, and eat well. Treat your body well. Treat your mind well. Do all the things. If you can take care of your physical body, your emotional body, and your mental body, you'll go a long way. You'll get the promotions. People will recognize you. You'll have that sustenance within your role there. And again, you can become bulletproof. But essentially, if there was going to be one thing that you were going to do, I can't say it hard, firmly enough. Have a purpose. Have a massive purpose. Know why you're there, and create a set of goals that you can actually see yourself achieving. Because that will be, if there's one thing that you get out of this, focus on that.
And I suppose I'd like to add something. Obviously, if mental health is increasing in our industry, then we need to speak out. Absolutely. And whether that is not necessarily speaking out on social media, but going to speak to other people, like you said earlier, speaking to 1 or 2 people that you can confine in, whether that's within the industry, whether that's outside of the industry, make them aware of maybe issues that you are going through, because they can have some resolutions as to how you overcome that. So I think that's a little bit I can add.
No, I know. I would echo that deeply as well. In all honesty, so our local government did a study on mental health in the FIFO industry. Mining and oil and gas is a massive industry in Western Australia. Anyway, after the government study, they found that 33%, that's a third of the entire FIFO workforce, are at higher risk of basically like mental stress. And so you can guarantee that every third person that you walk past on site is going through or is going to go through what you might be going through at some point if you're feeling a little bit like you might be on edge or something along those lines. So by speaking out, you're actually bringing people together as well, because you're not just going to stand out, you're not rare. And, I can guarantee you, I'm sure it doesn't matter where you are in the world, that it's about a third of the people who are working in isolation are going to be going through the same thing, and so definitely speak out, find your people, and make sure you're checking in on people and you've got people who are checking in on you.
Yeah. Dan, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing obviously your story and sharing your wisdom as well, and hopefully giving people that are listening to this podcast, even if they're not going through some of these issues, they potentially could do in the future. And I suppose you've given them a little bit of direction, a little bit of purpose. So really appreciate your time in sharing obviously your experiences and your wisdom. And obviously you're not necessarily in our mining industry, but you've worked in it. So like I said, appreciate your time in sharing this information. If anyone listening has got any questions, or they want to follow some of the things that you're doing in your coaching business, how can they go about contacting you, or what social media platforms are you on?
Yeah, sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the platforms in reality. I have a website, Daniello Greco, at daniello.com. I'll put the link you can pop it in the show notes if you like. Feel free to reach out, email me, and happy to answer any questions or offer any advice that I can. And that goes for companies as well as individuals. Happy to sort of speak to anybody, really. It's something I'm particularly quite passionate about.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you again for your time, Daniel. And those that are listening, really appreciate your time. Please share this. Share this with obviously people in our industry, wherever they are in the world. But also share this with people outside of our industry, because it's not mining related as well. Mental health is obviously a growing issue among, well, not necessarily people in work, it could be people outside of work. So just please share this episode, because I think it's important to anyone that could be going through challenges. It may not even be obvious either. So just please keep sharing these episodes, and especially this one, because I think it can appeal to many, many and different people within our industry and outside of industry. So really appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.